AI is one of the hot spots in the market right now. There's news almost every day about new technologies coming out, about machines being able to take over jobs, Terminators taking over the country. With me to discuss AI, robos, technology, and just change within the financial markets industry is Peter Memon. Peter is the Global Head of Emerging Technologies at Synechron. Peter, welcome to TabbFORUM.
Thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure being here today.
So are robots going to take over our jobs
Not
tomorrow?
yet. I think it's funny. You read in the news all the time how robots are going to take over finance and all our jobs, and I do think we're a ways away from that. It's not quite there yet.
So let's take a step back. So there's this whole issue around AI. So why don't you break it down? What are some of the issues? What is AI, and how are we going to start interacting with AI?
What is AI? That's a good thing. AI is a very broad topic that is, I never seen a really good definition of AI. I mean, ultimately, it is the definition of AI that we typically associate, or the average person associates it with, it was human thinking. We are far from that. We're very, very, very far from that. Right now, to me, AI is systems like deep learning that could make decisions based on, after being populated with tons and tons and tons of information. And that's where we are today. It's very, very basic stuff today that we're still doing. We're not anywhere near very sophisticated, and I think we're a long way from that. It will ultimately have enormous implications on what we do.
So when we start looking at banks and technology, they certainly have a lot of data. Can they easily implement AI kind of infrastructures to start learning, or do they need to be niche? They need to be narrow. How are you going to look at some of these implementations?
Let's take a look at the banks just in general. And there are different aspects of banking that can, in fact, I think, do some of this relatively easily. Or easier, the retail side, for instance, where the data is a lot more well-defined and easier.
And the processes tend to be more simple.
And they're much more robust, and they're much more mature. Or you get to investment banking, where the lines of businesses are very complicated, they're very different, the data is very disparate, it's also very complicated. Banks don't have a good handle on actually being able to access all this information. So implementing deep learning in investment banking, for instance, say in the credit trading, tends to be far more difficult. Not impossible, just far more difficult.
Okay, so where do you, so besides retail, because most of our viewership is a little bit more on the institutional side, and they are starting to use some type of, sorts of robo technologies, kind of more clerical operations.
Yeah.
How do you see this kind of moving forward, and what are
I think banks are all embracing it. They're all talking the talk right now. So I see, from where I came from JP, they have their feet, and they're touching a lot of these technologies now. They're looking at using deep learning, for instance, in parsing chats from Bloomberg. They're looking for these cases where they can get some value out of it. I do think, again, ultimately you're going to put it all over the place, but they're looking for small areas where they think they can actually get some wins out of this, where they have a good handle on the data, where they can go off and they can say, oh, can I parse this chat? Can I pull a trade out of it? Can I now book that trade? They're starting in those types of areas.
Okay.
I do think, again, you will see this, and I look at this, trading is a supply chain, front to back.
Right.
At some point, you're going to touch every aspect of the supply chain. There's no way you're going to get away from that. Anywhere from price generation to making recommendations to counterparties to optimization of capital, all that will be touched at some point or another.
So how do you look at the implementation of how will this change kind of the banks going forward? Certainly, banks have been, and the trading operations have been dependent on technology for 30, 40 years. How do you see that changing from now in fintech and AI? How do you see that changing over the next, let's just 10 or 15 years?
Well, I think they're going to become much more like software companies. I think they have to. I mean, if you look at these processes today, they're still very people-centric. Every aspect of the process is still heavily people-centric. I think you're going to see that change dramatically. I think you're going to see far, far more automation, especially as these algorithms get more robust, especially as you get NLP that can really parse apart these things with a high degree of accuracy. You're going to see it change more and more and more. I do think you're going to see from the front office, you'll see the diminishment of traders in sales.
Oh, we've been seeing that.
And you're going to see more and more of it, or you're going to have the one trader that's actually really good and a bunch of junior traders all the way through the pipeline. I think you'll see a reduction in headcount and optimization all across, which means
so the talented guys get paid and they stay. A lot of junior folks, and then the kind of guys that are just not being that effective kind of become fewer and fewer.
They become fewer and fewer. You push them out the door faster, for lack of a better way of putting it. I think you hire a lot more technology, a lot more good technology people.
Now, on the technology people side, it's been a long time since I developed technology within a bank, but we were more interested in getting stuff out the door than all the documentation and process and integration. In some cases, there were issues where, like we needed to get stuff done, so we did it in parallel, so there was no real communications, or, we did it to a certain extent, so I'm the expert here. This guy's not. I keep a job. He doesn't.
Right.
Do you see that changing, or do you see that? Do you think that that as these organizations become more technology-like, or do we wind up with a different class of people or a different technology management stream, or does it get outsourced, or how does that work out? How do we get, because clearly if everybody is building their own infrastructure, you get no economies of scale.
You don't get any economies of scale today in the investment bank because everybody's building their own infrastructure. There's no commonality between the asset classes, or minimal. The question is, do you get another class of people that are capable of building these systems? Because if you look at the technology people today, most of them are not going to go off and build machine learning systems. They just don't have the capability to do that.
Right.
I do think you're going to see a class of individuals that are capable of doing that. Different levels of education, different levels of expertise, understand these algorithms, understand how to apply them to the business. I mean, you look at today, so I kind of always hark back to when I started out as a technologist, a long time ago, 27 years ago, when as a technologist, I knew the business. I sat on a desk, I worked with the traders, I was responsible for actually understanding what was going on.
Right.
And that's gone by the wayside because so much has been outsourced, and you have many layers of management between the trader and the actual guy that does the implementation. And I've said this, I think many times, is that it has to collapse back to what it was. I need people who can sit on a desk, who actually really understand the business, and who are subsequently also capable of implementing a deep learning model at the same time. So in many ways, to me, it's like going back to what it was. And you lose a lot of the people that are just doing the generic jobs, or that stuff you outsource, but the guys on the desk, the guys that are working with the business, the ones that are making these big changes.
So we need a real revolution in thinking and staffing in the way we manage these organizations. Because when I started at Citi and Lehman in 1980, I agree. The people who were me as a business analyst, I ran operations before, and I knew this stuff backwards and forwards. I could calculate operations and do bonds, and that said, it's a long time ago since people built core back office systems like I built.
I know.
I would say it's probably, there aren't a whole lot of people who know how to do the stuff that I knew how to do 30 years ago.
No, there were not. And what's scary, things that I built 20 years ago are still around.
Yeah, I know.
And there are not many people that understand how to price a bond anymore. There are a lot of technologists that do that.
Yeah.
It's a lost.
Look at the computer.
Yeah, well, exactly. They don't appreciate this stuff, and they never had to learn it, so they don't know it.
Mm-hmm. But do you think that tends to change? Now, will that change come from inside, or do you think you'll see outside folks like the Amazons come in, and will they blow up the bottle completely because they don't have the legacy?
The question is, do the Amazons and the Facebooks of the world, who are clearly capable of entering banking and have entered banking, at least in the payment side, do they want to get into a highly regulated business? And if they think they can add value to it and they think they can make a profit off of it, I do think they will at some point do that. They're sitting on mountains of cash. And I do think, it's Fintech are not going to blow up the banks to the degree that the banks need to blow up. To me, it's kind of like a hedge move in some respects. They can partner with them. They could, they'll chip around the edges a little bit, but
make
they
it
can
a
absorb.
little bit more efficient, get the economics kind of okay, but not.
Exactly. You look at these fintech, they're not enterprise ready, most of them, so I can absorb them very quickly. It's not a big deal. I can optimize my stuff better than they can do it for me because most of them don't have banking experience. Most times they're dealing with the retail side, they're not dealing with the investment banking side. I do think, though, you have a bigger firm like an Apple or any of these guys decide, you know what, I want to be in the investment banking business, then they're done. Because those companies are built around using analytics and technology at their core. Banks, even though they're large technology shops, are still fundamentally banks.
So really the core, as you see it fit, see future, is really got to be analytics, agility, streamline, and to a certain extent go back to the way it was 20, 30 years ago, where you wind up basically with a new core infrastructure and the people around the business fully understand it front to back.
Exactly. That's exactly where we need to be.
Interesting.
At least that's my opinion where we need to be. How you get there is a different story. And do the banks have the want to get there and the desire to get there? I do think they need to be there. If they want to ultimately not get punished. There was a great article I saw recently, how much they're going to make over time. And it certainly diminishes, I think now there's like an 8% return that we're getting, and it's going to diminish to less than half that over time for a whole bunch of external forces. So things are going to change. The question is, are they going to optimize themselves in a way that they have to? And they have to do that. And that's a lot of cultural change. They've become very risk averse.
So you see this really as almost a Clay Christensen disruption play where we've gotten to the point where the industry's gotten fat, happy, and stupid, and the newer players are going to come in and just clean their clock out of left field.
Exactly. Like you read in Amazon now looking at getting into prescription drugs for argument's sake.
Right.
A business that is so off what they started out as, but they're going there. And because they look at, and that's a highly regulated business with intermediate payers. Now why can't you do the same thing with banking?
Interesting.
I think
with that sober look at banking and technology, and actually it's a really uplifting view of change and infrastructure and where technology and analytics and agility and new software models can go. Thanks for talking about the future with TabbFORUM.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it today. It was a pleasure.
Peter, thanks very much.
Thank you.